Webinar with Magoosh. On how to fund your grad. Graduate degree. Very excited to discuss this topic today a little bit more in depth because it's definitely something that I was very concerned about when I was applying and probably my biggest source of anxiety. So I'm happy to share what I know and point you in the direction for you to find the resources that you need for your graduate degree. So my name is V, and I am an admissions instructor here with Magoosh. I am a current PhD student. I'm in my 4th year in the humanities. My research is at the juncture of medical humanities and ethnic studies. I'm in the University of California system, also known as the UC system, and I'm at the University of California at Santa Barbara. A little bit about me. I'm originally from the East San Francisco Bay Area, a little city called Oakland. And as far as this conversation about funding goes, I'm happy to share that my PhD is fully funded. And I didn't even know that was possible when I was first applying. And once I went through my application journey, I realized that it was incredibly important to me and that it essentially needed to be a part of a program in order for me to really accept it and take it on, because the idea of having hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans for me was very daunting and not feasible for me. So this is something that can happen, especially with PhDs, a little bit more common than we might think, but still requires some strategizing and some preparation if you can. So before we go any further, I don't want to assume that anyone knows what funding is. So let's talk about it. Funding is essentially the money that's allocated from different sources is going to pay for your education. So we just broadly call it funding. And it's going to pay for your health insurance as a graduate student, or it can pay for your health insurance, your tuition, your graduate fees, even travel sometimes for research and conferences, and even room and board. And it can even just pay you as a research stipend or as a stipend. And so it'll actually just pay you as if you're working, but they're really paying you to do your research. And this funding can come through from many different sources. It can be financial aid that you can qualify for. It can be scholarships and fellowships, which is most likely what it will be. And most of these you're going to apply to. And you can apply to these while you're applying, so that when you are accepted, you already have fellowships and scholarships ready for you. And I highly recommend that you do that. And we'll get into that a little more. Of course, it can also be loans. Those are available to you as a student and for different, under different criteria. And essentially what this is a funding package, or funding packages, really, depending on what kind of program you're doing. And that is something that you will have clarity about once you're accepted to a program. They will tell you, hey, by the way, this is how much you're expected to pay. This is how much we can offer you, and all of that. But I think the point of this webinar is to create a strategy or circulate some information about how to anticipate funding before you're accepted, as you're applying, and really as you're selecting programs. So that leads me to the next slide. You shouldn't let costs discourage you, in my opinion, from pursuing graduate school, but you should absolutely let it guide you. And that is because there are so many programs and degrees out there. And sometimes we get set on one. Sometimes, and this has happened to me, I have a dream. I had a dream of being at UC Berkeley, and I didn't want to let that go. I wanted to be there. I needed to be there because I was from the Bay Area, and that's where I wanted to be. But when I finally let that go and just asked myself, okay, what is it that I want? Why do I want this degree? And where else can I receive that experience? I realized that, well, there's the whole UC system, and I'm actually quite interested in a lot of them. And so I was able to branch out. And maybe that's the case for you. Maybe you're really set on Harvard's MBA program. And I'm not saying you shouldn't apply, but just know that if you're not accepted, and if in the odd chance they don't have funding that is realistic for you, is there somewhere else where you can get that same kind of degree, training, exposure, and essentially still go on to do what it is that you want to do? It's an important question to ask yourself so that the idea of cost doesn't seem so much like something you can't get around. So as you're searching for programs, you should consider cost as a guiding factor. That's something that I would recommend to factor in when you're deciding if a program is ideal for you, if you're even going to apply. Don't let it be an afterthought just because it's hard to think about or because it feels overwhelming. Kind of like push yourself to dive into it and really look into what the likelihood of receiving full or partial funding is for that program or for each program that you're applying to. And then consider the possibilities of what you would do in the case of not getting the most ideal funding package, not getting the fellowships you're applying to. Is it feasible for you to take out loans for part of your degree? Does that program offer TA-ships so that you can be a TA and it will cover your tuition? What would be your plan? Even emergency funds. If you needed to take out loans, how much are you willing to take out? And what would that mean for you 10, 20 years down the line, depending on the career you're interested in? These are hard questions, honestly, because it does sometimes mean that you might have to make difficult changes in your approach to graduate school, or changes that feel really hard because you're letting go of something you really want. But they're important to keep in mind as you're applying and as you are seeking out resources and asking for support, basically anywhere possible. You don't want to leave any stone unturned. And I can tell you that from observing other students who have come in to their PhD program with external grants that they have already allocated, that they knew were available. So that is why we want to develop a strategy before we even start applying or as we're applying. And then the next point here is to know some strategies to negotiate funding, and that comes a little later once you're accepted. It's essential that you know how much that program that you're applying to is going to cost. And that is an answer that you can get before you're accepted. Some programs are explicit about the cost, and that'll probably be on their financial aid website, attached to the university website. Even the registrar, they might have those resources. The graduate handbook might even have those resources, or otherwise admission pages for the university and the program. And also remember that you do have to factor in your cost of living. So if you're moving to a new city or even a new state or country, considering what that is, your everyday life, your transportation, will you be able to live on campus, or will you be driving or taking a bus, your housing and other expenses of just life in general? So that is really important for you to factor in and calculate. And I do recommend speaking to a real person, a real human about that, calling the university and speaking to someone. I thought I had that in this slide over here, but okay, no, we're going to get to that. All right, so Finding funding and taking calculated risks is kind of what graduate school is. I feel like I would be lying to you if I wasn't honest that I see graduate school as a huge calculated risk. I mean, you're putting in the work, you're hoping that what you need is going to be available, you're hoping that you're going to get funding each year, and you're hoping that you're going to get a great job after, or the career that you're looking for, even if that's entrepreneurship, is going to be available for you. And finding funding is a part of that too. So it's important for you to calculate those costs, like I had mentioned previously, and then know the risks associated and the aid possibilities for each program. So risks might be, this program does offer TA-ships, but they're not a guarantee. That's a risk because you do not know what undergraduate enrollment will be in the area in which you are capable of TAing in. Now, if a program says we guarantee you a TA-ship, we guarantee it for all our graduate students, that's a different risk, or at least the degree of that risk is much different. So this is when I would recommend to speak directly to graduate program advisors as you're doing this work. Obviously, don't expect them to do this work for you, but once you've kind of got an idea based on your research from websites, from the financial aid office, even speaking to someone at the registrar office, that is a great time to reach out to the graduate program advisor. These are staff members that work in each program, and they handle all of the logistics and registration and forms. And they usually have a good idea of what funding packages are like and what those opportunities are like in the program you're applying to, or they can point you in the right direction because, again, every institution is different. So every program differs, and funding can even fluctuate per year. I know that the year that I was accepted, my program had significantly less funding than it does now, 4 years later, and that affected my funding package. And that's not necessarily something you can always predict or plan for, but it's important that you know and speak to someone the season or the year that you're applying to get the most up-to-date answer. I cannot stress this enough. Do not hesitate to ask. Do not hesitate to reach out, send a few formal, friendly emails, and even follow up. As these graduate program advisors can be very, very busy. Their role is really important in the department. Also know that your status will make you eligible or ineligible for funding. And it's important for you to know the parameters of that in your country and at your institution. So for example, your documentation status can impact your ability to receive funding. It can also make you available for certain funding. There are fellowships and scholarships out there specifically for undocumented students, but there are restrictions as far as how, when, where you can use those funds. And it's important for you to be able to do the research to figure that out as far as the institution you're at, the country you're at, and so forth. Non-traditional students, this is an interesting category. If you are considered a non-traditional student when applying, there might be funding available for you as well. I know someone who just received a beautiful funding package as a non-traditional student. Of course, he has, a great research project and he's very, very deserving of it, but you wouldn't necessarily think that there would be funding for that, and there absolutely is. So I encourage you to look into that. Also, your research interest can make you eligible for certain funding. So all of this is kind of just really knowing why you're going to graduate school, what your research interests are, and then, how your identity, your documentation status, and different parts of you as a person might also make you eligible for funding. So this is when you might speak to faculty that you know about potential funding opportunities. I'm not recommending for you to reach out to professors you've never spoken to or worked with and ask them to help you find funding. Don't do that. Please don't do that. But if you already know faculty at the department that you're applying to, say you've worked together before, you know each other based on some of the research projects, something like that, you might want to ask them like, hey, do you know of any funding packages or any opportunities, research assistantships, TA-ships or just overall internal fellowships at the university that I could apply to. They might have an inside scoop about certain things. The gentleman who I mentioned previously, who's coming in with external funding as a non-traditional student, was able to do it through the professor that he's working under directly. So these things can happen. It's important to ask in a friendly way, and also know that, you know, faculty, as you're applying, they might say, you know what, I don't offer that for any students who are applying because I want to make sure the playing ground is fair. And that makes sense too. Another thing that you should do is speak to a financial advisor at the institution you're applying to. I know the UC system has one at each UC. They're very unique. They have a very unique role. They really just work to help you find funding. And they have resources as far as list servers and websites, and just they are in the know about where funding is coming in from and how students can get access to it. So if you can make an appointment with them as you're applying, I highly recommend that. They might not be able to meet with you because you're not currently enrolled, but they might be able to say, hey, check out these websites. And that's still useful. And you can possibly find them within graduate division or graduate resources at the university you're applying to. And that is when you can seek internal grants from that university. Currently, I'm on an internal grant that I didn't even know existed. And I found just by poking around on my university website, and poof, I found something I qualified for. And I'm very grateful to have received it. But honestly, I would have never really known about it. It was definitely under my radar and under everybody's radar in my program. So once you've done this research, you can develop a strategy for each program to know if it's even worthy for you to apply to. If you know that that program basically offers no internal funding, or basically offers no funding package, including TA-ship, and they don't offer research assistantships, and they're basically flat out telling you, you need to have external funding because this program does not, then maybe that's not a program you can apply to, depending on what your expectations and your needs are. So this is, again, a strategy that is really more so about why you're applying to graduate school and what is worth it for you. If Berkeley was to have accepted me, they didn't even accept my application, and that's okay. But if they did, but they needed me to pay all of it, and there was no chance of TA-ships, internal funding, or fully funded years to do research, but UC Santa Barbara did offer that for me, I know that I would have let go of my dream to go to UC Berkeley, and I would have taken UC Santa Barbara because for me, um, you know, the loans are just not something that I saw as feasible for me to pursue my PhD. But this is different for everyone. And so it's important for you to develop that strategy for you and be able to apply it. Basically, kind of create the strategy as a set of eyeglasses that you now look through as you're looking for programs, as you're applying, and as you're seeking funding, because you know what your strategy is and what you're looking for. So to conclude, these are some really great resources. ProFellow is, it's a wealth of a resource. You can find not only fellowships and scholarships, but also other basically workshops to develop a strong CV or to kind of learn about how to apply to fellowships. And I think that's really a valuable resource. Another is findamasters.com. This is a great resource to find fully funded master's programs, again, depending on your status as an international student, as a non-traditional student, whatever that may be, as an undocumented student. So there are plenty more resources, but these two are really great. And of course, Magoosh is available because we can help you with your writing, with your GRE, or whatever standard exam you're taking. And those are things that factor into your funding. And that comes in later. That's not necessarily something you can anticipate. That's a part of the application process. But that again does play a very big role in the funding package that you will receive within the department. So that's all for now. We're going to jump into some Q&A and a discussion, and I'm really excited to hear from you all as far as how we can be of service and support you all through this complicated but doable aspect of applying to graduate school. This is our QR code, though, by the way, if you'd like to scan it and check out what kind of resources Magoosh has for you. And always know that if you desire to be in graduate school, then you absolutely belong in graduate school. Screen. And okay, I'm gonna work on pulling up the promo slides, but in the meantime, I'm gonna answer some questions. And I realized that, so this question by Asit is, can you describe funding related to PhD? And also, if you have any other questions, please put them in the chat. So, okay, the PhD is unique in the sense that it's a long program, right? It's 5 to 7 years, maybe even longer, possibly. Some people do take longer. And so throughout the duration of that period, you will most likely be applying to external fellowships and grants. Not just for the money, even if you, or the funding, even if you came in as a fully funded package, you would still be applying to fellowships, most likely, because that provides extra training for you. So, for instance, I am in a fellowship now, and we meet every week, and I get additional support, mentorship, training, and all of that, which is necessary to complete your PhD. So whether or not your PhD is fully funded, you will be applying to fellowships every single year, most likely. And so that is a huge part of funding related to the PhD. So even if your institution or your program offers, let's say, 3 full years of funding, and then they offer 2 years of fellowships, or excuse me, TA-ships, which means you would be a teacher assistant to a professor, and you would receive a stipend, and your tuition would be paid. It usually works that way. You would still seek out external funding from other fellowships. This is it's kind of like a monster in itself. I wish I knew that fellowships would be such a big part of the PhD, because it's a certain type of experience. You know, you're applying for external funds. You don't know if you'll get it. It's a long process. You're getting letters of rec all the time, but it's just a part of the PhD. So that is a huge part of funding related to all PhD programs. I hope that answers your question, Steve, but if you want, if you have a more specific question, just go ahead and drop it in the chat. And everyone, like, I realize I use a lot of terms that you probably wouldn't know unless you were already in graduate school. And I want to be more cognizant of that, because things like TA-ships, fellowships, funding package, I had no idea what that was before I got into the PhD program. And so if you have any questions about what that is, do not hesitate to ask. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have, okay? Okay, Asit says, in UC, it says partial funding. What is it? Can you describe? Absolutely. So what partial funding means, and it's going to differ. This is the reality, especially in the UC system, because that's the system I'm in, so I'm most familiar with. Partial funding means they will offer you a funding package. Once you're accepted, they'll give you a letter of like an acceptance letter and a funding package letter. And that partial funding is going to break down differently for every student. So partial funding could mean we offer 2 years, we pay for your tuition, your health insurance, we pay for everything. And we even pay you like a stipend. They're paying, and that money that they pay you is going to go to your rent, your living expenses, and everything. But partial funding means, let's say they only offer 2 years. Let's say they offer 3, 4 years, whatever that may be. It means those other years, you are responsible for allocating your own funding through fellowships. That or you will be a TA, a teaching assistant, which basically means you'll be hosting, in the UC system, they call them sections, and they're 50 minutes. You'll be doing a lot of grading with undergraduates. That does take time. It's at least like 20 to 30 hours a week. But that is how your tuition will be paid. So you'll either be doing that, or you'll be taking out loans, or you'll have an external fellowship. And when I first heard that, I was like, oh my God, it seems like I'm going to be in a lot of debt. That's not true if you can be committed to applying to fellowships. For me, for example, every fall to like winter, I'm applying to fellowships probably more or just as much as I'm pursuing my own research. Why? Because the fellowship I get is the funds that I have for the next couple years. So as long as you are aware that you'll be writing, basically doing grant writing, you'll be writing to fellowships and scholarships, presenting your research proposal, basically almost the way that you apply to graduate school now, but a little bit more advanced. As long as you're aware that you will be doing that, the likelihood of you receiving external grants are reasonable. And so you can expect that by year 4, 5, 6, or 7, you'll be in the flow of doing that and you would have received external funding. That's kind of, that's an aspect of the PhD that I wasn't aware of and that I kind of just learned through experience. Okay, so I'm gonna go into Deva's question, or Diva, I'm not certain. How much does GRE score matter for getting accepted in a course? I wonder if you mean into a program, because to my knowledge, the GRE is not going to impact your ability to take a course once you've been accepted. But if you mean being accepted into a program, it differs. It differs for every program out there, because some programs really do weigh that score as a really important indicator of who they can accept. But for some programs, it doesn't play that big of a role. So when you are considering your GRE score as far as being accepted into a program, that is something you need to figure out per program, because it's not universal. So let's say you're applying, maybe Deva, you can tell me what kind of programs you're applying to, but let's just say you're applying to psychology programs all over the country, Research One institutions. You would contact every single program, speak to the graduate advisor, or look on the website. They might even just have information right there, like we expect this score for acceptance. They usually do say that. And so then that's how you know what role the GRE is going to play in your acceptance. You really just need to ask or seek out the information on the university website. Okay, Deva said master's in biostatistics or healthcare data science. Okay, so that's distinct in the sense that I'm sure that being able to demonstrate that you are, proficient or advanced in statistics or all, I'm pretty sure that those programs are going to consider the GRE. But as far as the score that is necessary for you to be accepted, that is dependent on each program. So you'd have to ask them, contact the graduate admissions advisor, contact admissions, the registrar, get that information however you can, and keep it in mind as you're applying and studying for the GRE. Asit says, many universities, as you know, they do not require GRE, TOEFL, that's how I say it. How can we apply for funding? Yes, so the, okay, no, never mind, sorry. The standard exams, if they don't require it, then it's just not an aspect, it's not something that they consider for funding. But that means that they consider everything else. So they're considering your essays and the information that you're providing, basically how you're demonstrating that you are prepared for the program, what you will be doing after. That is how they're determining how to allocate funds for each graduate student that is accepted into the program. Again, I think a lot of students overemphasize the GRE. They think like that is the way to get in and to get a great funding package. I think maybe it used to be more emphasized in the past, and now I think that there is more of an emphasis on looking at like a student as a whole. So what are their extracurriculars? What kind of research have they done? What research do they intend to do? Have they published before? Are they invested in other things that support their research already? How much do their research interests, so you as an applicant, how much does your research interest align with the mission of the program you're applying to and the research that they already have in development? Those are things that they consider. And it's really, I cannot emphasize it enough, that is what you should be looking at, is like your application as a whole. You kind of want to put yourself in the position of the review committee. Those are the people reading your applications and deciding, why should they choose you and invest in you as a student to complete this degree? And how do they know that you're likely to complete it, that you're likely to do it in a timely manner, and that your research is going to contribute to the overall development of knowledge within that program? Those are kind of like, those are harder things to answer. They're not as clear as just a GRE score, but nonetheless, that's what you need to be considering. I hope that answers your question, Asit. If you want to follow up, feel free to add a follow-up question in the chat. Okay, so let's move on to Maxwell here. Do I really need to take the GRE to increase my chances of funding for an MSc computer science? Okay, so taking the GRE is only necessary if that program requires the GRE. So if the program you're applying to, Maxwell, does not require the GRE, like they said, we're not going to look at it, we don't require it, then no, you do not need to take it. Yeah, it just comes down to that. Now, if it is required, then unfortunately, yeah, you absolutely do have to take it. Does that make sense? Yeah. But maybe you can clarify, Maxwell, like what you mean, if as far as like, are you applying to a program that doesn't really require it, or whatever that may be. Okay. Okay. Okay, let's move on to Asit's comments here. Asit says, well, I may sound illogical and an idiot a bit. No, not at all. But I want to get enrolled in J.A. Dudna's lab of UC Berkeley. Okay, that's great that you know what lab you want to be in. Wonderful. For my PhD in genomic science, can you just describe what I should do? Okay, I love the specificity of this question. And Asit followed up and said, I am already a GRE prep student of Magoosh already. Great. Okay, so Asit, if you know which lab you want to get into and that you want to be at UC Berkeley in PhD, in the PhD program, what I hope you have already in development is, what is your research? And is your research in alignment with that lab? Because that's the way it works. If that lab is doing research in the type of research you want to do, then that is, one of the criteria that they will use to decide if you can be accepted into that lab. So whatever your research interests are, it's important that you know how to articulate your research interest, your proposal, what it is that you'll be doing, and why you want to do that at Berkeley, and why specifically you want to do that in that lab. You see, because that's what you'll be putting into your essay, and that is what the review committee will be using to decide if you're a good fit. Now, I'm not working in a lab. That's not my research, right? So I didn't reach out to labs to see if I was a good fit. Now we have another Magoosh admissions instructor who did, and based on my experiences with her, she did reach out to the labs if she was interested in. And you kind of have to, because one, you need to know if they even have room for more students. Two, if your research is in alignment with that lab, and kind of make like a connection, a friendly, formal connection with the director of that lab. So I don't know who J.A. Dudna is, but if you could reach out to her and let her know, and she might not respond, and that's okay, but she also could respond. And you could say, hi, I'm a potential, I'm interested in applying to this program this year and interested in working in your lab. These are my research interests. Are you accepting more students? And is there a possibility of discussing further? Do not assume that they're available to discuss further, but if they are, then you might have a great opportunity to kind of make a great first impression and to let that the possibility that Dudna would consider you when they're thinking about which students they want to accept the following year. So that is not an illogical or bad question. That is a wonderful question, Asit. And if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, okay? I'm happy to discuss like specific scenarios because I think that other students can benefit from that. Okay. Okay, Deva says, how do I know which universities are more likely to accept my application? That is a hard question. I mean, basically, so you're not looking at the university when it comes to graduate school, you're looking at the program. So you're looking at the requirements of the program. And every program you're applying to is going to have most likely, they're going to have very different requirements. And so it's your job to see how you measure up in that category. So let's say a program requires, let's just say, a certain level, a certain GRE score, is looking for applicants with experience in X, Y, and Z. And, I think that's all you can really kind of know prior to applying. You'd measure up your GRE score, you see where you stand. Your GPA is another thing. I forgot about that one. You'd see where you stand. And then your essays. Essays are huge. What is the content that you're going to be putting into your essays? Are you a competitive applicant for a program? That's something I can't necessarily answer for you because I don't know where you're applying and I don't know your previous academic and research experiences or professional experiences. All of those things contribute to how competitive of an applicant you are. And those are things that are kind of subjective sometimes. You can be the most ideal applicant, but there is no one in that program who is doing the research that you're doing. And so therefore that program can't provide a mentor for you. And that is a totally justified reason to not accept a student. You have to understand that the program wants to ensure that they're going to have a mentor for you and that you're going to have basically faculty that you can work with throughout the duration of your program. That is probably a little bit more specific to PhDs, but even in a master's, there's still a need for your research interests to align with the faculty who are there to a certain extent. It doesn't need to be identical, but to a certain extent, so that they know that they can support you. And that's something you should be asking yourself, like, do these universities and programs offer what I need? So I hope that helps, Deva. If you have follow-up questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. Okay, we're good on time. Maxwell says, most of the programs I'm applying to do not require the GRE, but my friends are saying that I have to take the GRE if I want to increase the value of my funding. Okay. Unless your friend has been accepted to that program or is in that program, I would not take anything that your friends say at face value. I would always do my own research. And that's the nature of graduate school. You need to be able to do your own research and kind of find the answers for yourself. So if they do not require the GRE and they're saying, listen, if you send it, we won't even read it, we won't even look at it, then it might be a waste of time and energy and resources to do it. Now, if they say, we will look at it if you send it, but we don't require it, I would still take the exam, especially if you think you can get a competitive score. If you're not getting a good score, but you want to beef up your GPA and you think you can write really good essays, then maybe I wouldn't take the exam because I wouldn't want them to look at the score. So Maxwell, this for you comes down to if the program will look at the GRE. If it's vague on the website, you don't know, contact the program. Contact each program, ask to speak to the graduate advisor. Let them know that you're someone who will be applying this year and that you would just like to clarify about the role the GRE will play in your acceptance and funding. Now, some of them may say something very vague. I remember when I was applying and I was asking these questions, they were like, you just need a good score. I was like, okay, well, like how much of a role is that going to play in my funding? They're like, you just need a good score. And it does kind of just come down to that. If they will look at the GRE, they're kind of just looking to see if you're meeting the minimum requirement or if you're above it. So to clarify, double check with each program if they will even look at the GRE. If they say it's not required, but we will look at it, I would recommend taking it. And I would recommend doing your very best on it, because if anything, it can only help you. You know, if you submitted it and you have a strong GRE score and you and another applicant have a very similar application profile, but you have the very strong GRE score, or at least a pretty good one, it does kind of add to some kind of justification for why you should be accepted or why you should receive certain funding. So I hope that makes sense. If you have follow-up questions, please let me know. Okay. Yes, thank you. We do have a live stream that we did last week. Yeah, it's just last week. We were talking about GRE scores and funding, and we had a GRE specialist present with us. And so a lot of the information that she provided is really valuable and stuff that I wish that I knew. And so I really recommend you take a look at that one, because we went into the role that the GRE can play when it comes to funding packages within programs, like that internal dynamic once you're accepted. Okay, absolutely, my pleasure, Maxwell. So Asit says Nobel Prize winner in chemistry. Okay, Jennifer Ann Dudna. Okay, so that's the person whose lab you want to be in. Well, I would assume, especially at UC Berkeley, that it's competitive to get into that lab, and that people are reaching out either to her or the lab director, or depending on how big that lab is, the advisor for the lab, and basically trying to see what they need to do to get in. So that's something you want to do as well. You want to, as much as possible, speak to a real person and ask them, like, is this lab accepting applicants? What kind of applicants are you looking for? What kind of research is the lab doing? Because some labs actually, they don't just like accept first year PhD students, that you can be accepted into the program. And then a few years down the line in your PhD, once it's clear what your research is, and you've passed maybe one or two of the early milestones, like maybe you already got your master's in the program, maybe you already took the oral exam. Around that time, a little later, is when students will start applying for labs. So again, that's an internal dynamic that is unique to every program, and that is your responsibility to kind of figure out. So because it's, September, you still have time for people to get back to you and for you to apply that in your application strategy. Let's say you reach out to Dr. Dudna, right? Let's say she does get back to you and she has some information for you, and she actually is able to meet with you on Zoom. Let's just say, I don't know, and I don't want to say that that's what all professors do, but let's say she does, right? And you get to connect, and she's like, wow, your research really aligns with the lab. We could really use someone who is interested in such and such fields of research. That is then something you could include in your essays. You could say, after my correspondence with Dr. Dudna, I was confirmed that my research would be supported in the lab, and therefore I'm very interested in pursuing X, Y, and Z. And I think that, I know that UC Berkeley would be the most ideal place for me to receive the training that I desire to publish and work in this field. That, to a review committee, really demonstrates that you're prepared for graduate school and that you might be an ideal candidate. Now, not everybody gets that opportunity. Not everybody reaches out to professors and gets a confirmation before they apply. Especially in humanities, I'd say it's less common. But when it comes to working in labs, it is very important, because, again, you need to know that the lab is even taking on more students, that research is continuing, and that you'll be able to do your work there and that they are interested in your research too. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, so Asit says, okay, I was thinking to go for MS again, facing many odds to get admitted into PhD. I have completed my master's in India. I will pursue MS in US again. Okay, well, if you're interested in sharing what you feel that those odds are, we can discuss them. I still have 9 minutes. So, okay, nearly got 7 to 8 applications rejected from various universities. Have you gotten any feedback on your essays, Asi? Because sometimes what I've seen is it's not that you're not qualified or prepared, it's that your presentation of your experiences, your research interests, your research proposal could be a bit more polished. So I wonder if you've gotten support with that. Because I do think that essays play a major, major part in getting accepted. And I wonder which universities you had applied to. It seems like you already applied to PhDs. Are not more, yes, my projects are not more requiring. Can you clarify what you mean by that? Not more requiring, if possible? Okay, your projects are not up to the mark. Okay, so sometimes I think when applying to PhDs, we don't realize how fleshed out our ideas need to be to convey them to someone else. So your project and your research idea might be exactly what they're looking for, or it might be in line with what that program is interested in supporting, but you might just not know how to convey that. And it's hard. When I first started fellowship writing, I really had no idea how to convey my ideas and demonstrate that I can do that in a timely manner. So if you can, Asit, I really recommend you check out the essay review that Magoosh has. And we do have a promotion right now, which I am going to get to right now, because this is a great time to work on those essays, because you do still have time, especially if you're applying to UC Berkeley. I think applications aren't due until early to mid-December. So this is a great opportunity to start working on that. Let me go back to StreamYard. Okay, Sidesh says, what is a recommended GRE score for MS and computer science for any university in general? And does the 2 years of work experience greatly help in getting an admit? So again, GRE scores are not universal. There is no universal score for an MS in computer science. It is entirely dependent on the department. You need to contact every department you're applying to, or check out and really dig through their university website to get that answer. And they will usually tell you, these are the scores that we're looking for. Or if they tell you, oh, we just need a strong score, then try to ask, well, what have previous admits, what was their general score? What was the average score? And if you still don't get an answer, then try to get above average and mostly in the higher percentile if you can. Basically, you're just trying to demonstrate to the best of your capacity that you are prepared in certain, and that you have like critical thinking, and that you're able to take an exam and basically perform under pressure. And I don't think that's the best way of judging that, but that is what the GRE is used for right now. So you have to reach out to each program to get those answers. Okay, Tech Guru said, hey, can I give GRE exam for fall 2023 till November 15th? I would need you to clarify that question. I don't understand what you're asking. Can I give GRE exam for fall 2023? Yeah. I don't know if you mean, can you take it now, November 15th, and use it for applications? I don't, please clarify. I'm not certain what that question is. Okay, so Asit's follow-up points were that they applied to UC San Diego, Arizona State, Johns Hopkins, NYU. So those are pretty top-notch ranking universities, and UK Nottingham. Yeah, so it would be really interesting to see if you could get any feedback from them. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you can contact them and say, hey, I'm just interested if the review committee has any feedback on my application. They might. This is something that not a lot of people realize they can ask for, but it can go a really long way. You never know if someone's going to be interested to talk to you and say, you know what, Asi, we read your application and we really liked it, but there was this one aspect that just made us feel like the PhD is not right for you right now. And if you can get that information, that can go a really long way. Now, if no one's available to talk to you, if they're like, sorry, we don't offer that, that's okay. You can still work with the essays that you have and work to develop a better application. Now, it seems like you applied to just, different institutions of different caliber and in different places and probably different programs. So that means that you really need a tailored application for each program. Okay. Which is hard to do. I mean, it takes time to do it, and it's challenging, but it is a really important part of applying to graduate school, is being able to create an application that really speaks to each program that you're applying to. You want to speak to them as if this is the only program you're applying to and your top choice. So I just want to let you all know that we have a promotion going on right now. So it's 20% off with this live stream coupon code. So let me share my screen again. Yes. So hopefully you can see that. Yay, okay. Yes, so this is our promo right now. Please scan the QR code. It's 20% off. Share it with your friends, other people who are applying. And so the foundations program or platform, the foundations plan, the foundations plan is 1 month. So you get 24 self-paced videos with a bunch of information about applying to graduate school, basically everything you could ask for as far as GRE, funding, essays, focus strategies, writing, how to write the essays, that's all there. And there is a dedicated Discord channel so you can engage with other people who are applying too. And then for our foundations for 12 months, you get 12 months access. You get the same content, but you get it for the full year. So you can really work to develop, like Asit was mentioning, like several different applications for several different institutions and programs, which takes more time than just a month usually. And then our foundations and review offers 12 months as well, but you get 2 writing reviews for your essays. So that is if you're, just kind of struggling in conveying your ideas and really developing a strong research plan and personal statement, that's the package for you. And so please scan this QR code and you will be able to access that. And please share it with people people in your network who are looking for that as well. Yes, thank you for posting on the chat. Okay, so that's all for now, everyone. Just remember that we do have these webinars every week, so we'll be doing another one next week. And tune into our Discord, which you can find on our website with that coupon code and that link posted in the chat, and see all of the fun resources that Magoosh is offering. So have a great rest of your day. Thank you.